The rain fell in relentless sheets across the city, transforming the evening streets into glistening rivers that reflected the neon signs and streetlights. Emma Parker hurried along the sidewalk, one hand clutching her umbrella while the other balanced a paper bag containing a still-warm loaf of sourdough bread from Angelo's bakery. The comforting aroma wafted through the paper, a small pleasure after a grueling 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital. She was supposed to be celebrating tonight. After 3 years of dating, Michael had finally proposed last weekend, a perfect sunset moment at the lighthouse where they'd first met. The vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother now adorned her finger, catching the light even on this gloomy evening. Yet instead of joining her friends for drinks as planned, she'd been called in to cover for a colleague. Such was life in the emergency department. As Emma turned the corner toward the bus stop, a hunched figure beneath the shelter caught her attention. An older woman sat with her back against the glass wall, several plastic bags containing what appeared to be her possessions, arranged carefully around her feet. She wore multiple layers despite the mild spring temperature, a faded blue raincoat over a grey sweater, with a knitted scarf wrapped around her neck. Her silver-streaked hair hung in damp tendrils around a weathered face. What struck Emma wasn't the woman's disheveled appearance but her eyes, deep brown and unnervingly vacant, staring straight ahead as if seeing something beyond the physical world. There was something about those eyes that made Emma slow her pace. The bus shelter provided minimal protection from the sideways rain. Emma hesitated, then stepped under the shelter, shaking water from her umbrella. "Nasty weather," she offered, more to fill the silence than to start a conversation. The woman didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge Emma's presence. Up close, Emma noticed the fine bone structure beneath the weathered skin, the elegant hands, despite their dirt-rimmed nails. This woman had known another life once. "Excuse me," Emma tried again. "Are you all right? Do you need help getting somewhere?" The woman's eyes finally flickered toward Emma, focusing slowly as if returning from a distant place. "I'm where I need to be," she replied, her voice surprisingly refined despite its hoarseness. Emma nodded, unsure how to respond. The digital display indicated 7 minutes until her bus arrived. She opened her purse, found a $5 bill, and extended it toward the woman. Maybe this could help with a hot meal. The woman didn't reach for the money. Instead, she looked at Emma with an intensity that felt almost invasive, as if searching for something in Emma's face. "I don't need your money, dear," she said softly. Emma felt a strange prickle at the base of her neck. The woman's gaze held something beyond the typical vacant stare of those who lived on the streets. Something knowing and eerily familiar, though Emma was certain they'd never met. Impulsively, Emma opened her paper bag. "Would you like some bread? It's fresh from Angelo's." For the first time, the woman's expression changed, a flash of something like recognition crossing her features. "Angelo's," she repeated almost to herself, "on Maple Street." "Yes," Emma confirmed, surprised. "Have you been there?" A ghost of a smile touched the woman's lips. "In another lifetime." Emma broke off half the loaf and extended it. After a moment's hesitation, the woman accepted it, her fingers brushing against Emma's. Despite the chill in the air, her touch was surprisingly warm. "Thank you," the woman said, bringing the bread to her nose and inhaling deeply. "Sourdough was always my favorite." The way she said it, with a hint of wistfulness, made Emma wonder about the story behind those eyes. Who had this woman been before circumstances placed her on this bus bench? "I'm Emma," she offered, surprising herself with the introduction. The woman took a small bite of bread, chewing thoughtfully before answering. "Some call me Ruth," she said, though something in her tone suggested this might not be her real name. The headlights of the approaching bus illuminated the shelter, casting long shadows behind them. Emma gathered her belongings, oddly reluctant to leave. "It was nice to meet you, Ruth," she said, as the bus doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. Ruth nodded, her gaze once again distant. "Take care of yourself, Emma, and take care of him too." Emma paused, one foot on the bus step. Him? But Ruth had already turned away, her attention focused on the bread in her hands. The bus driver cleared his throat impatiently, and Emma had no choice but to board. As the bus pulled away from the curb, Emma looked back through the rain-streaked window. Ruth remained motionless on the bench, a solitary figure against the glowing city backdrop. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, though she couldn't possibly know that this brief interaction would upend her entire existence. That night, Emma dreamed of a woman with Ruth's eyes, standing in a kitchen she'd never seen, kneading bread dough with flour-covered hands. The woman looked up and smiled, not the weathered smile of the woman at the bus stop, but a vibrant, full-lipped smile that transformed her entire face. Emma woke with tears on her cheeks and couldn't understand why. 3 days later, while organizing files at work, Emma found herself thinking about Ruth again. Had she found shelter from the continuing rain? Was the bread enough to sustain her that night? The memory of those haunting eyes wouldn't leave her. On impulse, during her lunch break, Emma returned to the bus stop with another loaf of bread from Angelo's and a thermos of hot soup. But Ruth wasn't there. Emma returned the next day, and the next, but the mysterious woman had vanished as suddenly as she had appeared. Emma might have eventually forgotten about the encounter, if not for the dinner invitation that arrived from Michael's father. After 5 years of widowhood following his wife's presumed death, Theodore Reynolds was finally ready to host a proper family gathering to celebrate his son's engagement. It was time, he'd told Michael, to move forward, to welcome Emma officially into what remained of their family. As Emma selected a deep emerald dress for the occasion, chosen to match her engagement ring, she had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness had set in motion events that would unravel 17 years of secrets, lies, and heartbreak. She couldn't know that the bread she'd shared would become the first crumb on a trail, leading back to a truth that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. The universe, it seemed, had been watching that rainy evening, orchestrating an encounter that would prove that sometimes the most significant moments arrive disguised as the most ordinary ones. The Reynolds estate stood like an elegant sentinel at the end of a winding driveway lined with mature oak trees. Built in the 1920s, the colonial revival mansion with its white columns and symmetrical windows had been in Theodore Reynolds' family for 3 generations. Emma had visited before, of course, but tonight felt different, more formal, more significant. "Nervous?" Michael asked as he navigated his car around the circular drive, coming to a stop at the front entrance. In the fading evening light, the house's windows glowed warmly. Emma smoothed her emerald dress. "A little," she admitted. "Your father has always been kind to me, but this feels official," Michael finished, reaching over to squeeze her hand. The platinum band of her engagement ring caught the light. "Dad's been different since I told him about the engagement. More animated, more present. I think he's finally allowing himself to move forward." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Theodore Reynolds had been a ghost of himself since his wife's disappearance 17 years ago. According to Michael, his father had never fully accepted Catherine Reynolds' absence, holding on to hope long after the police had exhausted all leads and the case had gone cold. "He loved her so much," Michael continued, his voice soft with remembrance. "Even after all this time, he's never looked at another woman, never even considered it." Emma leaned over and kissed his cheek, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. "That kind of love is rare," she said. "I hope we have that minus the tragedy." Michael's expression clouded briefly before he forced a smile. "We will, minus the tragedy part, definitely." He exited the car and came around to open her door. "Ready to face the Reynolds family inquisition?" Emma laughed as she stepped out, linking her arm through his. "Is your Aunt Olivia still determined to plan our wedding?" "Absolutely. And she's bringing her wedding portfolio, 7 inches thick and growing." They approached the imposing front door, which opened before they could ring the bell. Theodore Reynolds stood in the entryway, tall and distinguished in a charcoal suit that emphasized his lean frame. At 62, he remained handsome, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same compelling blue eyes that Michael had inherited. "There they are," he said warmly, embracing Michael before turning to Emma. "And our beautiful bride-to-be. That color is stunning on you, my dear." "Thank you for hosting this, Mr. Reynolds," Emma replied as he kissed her cheek. "Theodore, please. We're family now." He ushered them inside. "Everyone's gathered in the drawing room. Olivia has been here since 3 o'clock, arranging flowers and interrogating the caterers. The house smelled of beeswax polish, fresh flowers, and something delicious baking. Emma had always loved this home, with its blend of formality and warmth, oriental rugs over hardwood floors, oil paintings in gilded frames, and comfortable furniture that invited rather than intimidated. They followed Theodore through the central hallway toward the drawing room, where voices and laughter could be heard. Emma was adjusting the bracelet on her wrist when a framed photograph on the hallway table caught her attention. She slowed, letting Michael and his father continue ahead while she examined it. The photograph showed a woman in her 30s, with dark hair swept up elegantly, laughing at something off-camera. She wore a simple black dress with a strand of pearls, her hand raised slightly, as if she'd been gesturing while speaking. There was a luminous quality to her, a vitality that transcended the two-dimensional image. "That's my mother," Michael said, returning to Emma's side. "It was taken at Dad's 50th birthday, about 8 months before she disappeared." Emma studied the photograph more closely. Catherine Reynolds had been beautiful, but not in a conventional way. Her features were striking rather than perfectly harmonious. High cheekbones, a slightly aquiline nose, and expressive dark eyes that dominated her face. There was something familiar about those eyes that nagged at Emma's memory. "She was lovely," Emma said softly. "She was extraordinary," Theodore corrected, joining them. "Catherine lit up every room she entered. When she vanished—" He paused, visibly gathering himself. "Well, the light went with her." The raw pain in his voice made Emma reach for his hand instinctively. "I'm sorry, I can't imagine what that must have been like." Theodore squeezed her fingers gratefully before releasing them. "Tonight isn't about the past. It's about your future with Michael. Catherine would have adored you, Emma. She had a gift for seeing the truth in people, and you have a goodness that can't be hidden." Emma felt a flush of emotion at his words. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They continued to the drawing room, where the small gathering of family members waited. Michael's Aunt Olivia, Theodore's younger sister, rushed forward to embrace Emma, already talking about venue options. Michael's cousin James offered congratulations, while his wife Victoria showed Emma their recently born daughter. The atmosphere was festive and warm. As Theodore tapped a spoon against his crystal glass to propose a toast, Emma felt a wave of gratitude. Despite the absence at the heart of this family, the missing matriarch whose photograph graced the hallway, there was genuine joy here. She glanced at Michael, finding him watching her with such tenderness that her heart constricted. "To Emma and Michael," Theodore was saying, raising his glass, "may your lives together be blessed with the deepest joy and the kind of love that endures all things." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment. Emma sipped her champagne, letting the bubbles tickle her throat as she looked around at these people who would soon be her family. The moment felt perfect, complete. Then the doorbell rang. Theodore frowned slightly. "Are we expecting anyone else?" he asked Olivia, who shook her head. "I'll get it," offered James, setting down his glass. Emma was listening to Victoria's advice about wedding photographers when she heard James's voice from the hallway, sounding confused. "I'm sorry, Mum, but who are you looking for?" A female voice responded, too low to distinguish the words. Then James again, "I think you must have the wrong address." Theodore excused himself to investigate, and after a moment Michael followed. Emma continued her conversation with Victoria, though her attention had shifted to the muffled voices in the hallway. Suddenly, there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. Emma turned toward the drawing-room entrance, where Michael now stood frozen, his face drained of all color. Behind him, Theodore gripped the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "Michael!" Emma moved toward him, alarmed by his expression. "What's wrong?" But Michael seemed incapable of speech, his eyes fixed on something or someone behind him in the hallway. Emma gently moved past him to see what had caused such shock. In the hallway, illuminated by the chandelier's golden light, stood a woman in clean but simple clothes, jeans and a beige sweater that hung loosely on her thin frame. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, revealing a face that was both familiar and transformed. It was Ruth, the woman from the bus stop, but not as Emma had seen her before. This woman stood straighter, cleaner, her eyes clear and focused rather than distant. Those eyes, those dark, expressive eyes that had seemed so familiar, now moved from Theodore to Michael, filled with an emotion too complex to name. "Catherine?" Theodore whispered, the name emerging as a prayer and a question. The woman's gaze returned to him, and she nodded once, her composure beginning to fracture. "Hello, Theo," she said, her voice barely audible. Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her. The homeless woman she'd given bread to, the stranger whose eyes had haunted her dreams, was Catherine Reynolds, Michael's mother, the woman who had vanished without a trace 17 years ago. As the realization crashed through her, Emma remembered Ruth's, Catherine's, parting words at the bus stop. "Take care of yourself, Emma, and take care of him too." She had known. Somehow, she had known who Emma was. The champagne glass slipped from Emma's fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound breaking the frozen tableau. Catherine's eyes shifted to Emma, and in them was a mixture of gratitude and apology that made Emma's chest ache. "You," Emma whispered. Catherine nodded. "The angel with the bread," she said softly. "I knew I had to find you again. I knew it was time to come home." The next few minutes dissolved into chaos. Olivia's shriek of recognition, James's stuttered questions, Victoria clutching her baby protectively, as if Catherine's unexpected return might somehow threaten them. Through it all, Theodore and Michael remained frozen, as if afraid any movement might cause the apparition before them to vanish again. It was Emma who finally took charge, guiding Catherine to a chair in the drawing room and asking Victoria to bring water. The room hummed with tension and disbelief as Catherine Reynolds, or the woman claiming to be her, sat perched on the edge of an armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Is it really you?" Theodore finally asked, his voice strangled with emotion. He hadn't taken his eyes off her since she'd appeared in the doorway. Catherine nodded, her composed facade beginning to crack. "It's me, Theo." "But how? Where?" He stopped, seemingly unable to formulate a coherent question from the thousands that must have been racing through his mind. "Perhaps we should give them some privacy," Olivia suggested, though her wide eyes betrayed her reluctance to leave. "No," Catherine said quickly. "Whatever needs to be said should be said to everyone. I've caused enough secrets and pain." Her gaze moved to Michael, who still hadn't spoken. "Especially to you." Michael swallowed visibly. 17 years, he said, each word precise and measured. 17 years without a word? We thought you were dead?" The raw pain in his voice made Emma move to his side, slipping her hand into his. His fingers were ice cold. Catherine nodded, accepting the accusation. "I know, and I'm so sorry. More sorry than I can ever express." She drew a deep breath. "I didn't have the right to come back, I know that. But after meeting Emma," her eyes flickered to Emma briefly, "I couldn't stay away any longer." "Meeting Emma?" Theodore repeated, confusion momentarily overriding his shock. "You two know each other?" Emma explained the encounter at the bus stop, watching Theodore's expression shift from confusion to disbelief as she described giving bread to the woman she'd known as Ruth. "You were homeless?" Theodore asked Catherine, horror creeping into his voice. "All this time?" Catherine's gaze dropped to her hands. Not all this time, but recently, yes. Why? The question exploded from Michael, 17 years of hurt compressed into that single word. Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back? Do you have any idea what it did to us? Catherine flinched as if he had struck her. I wish I had a simple answer that would make it all make sense, but there isn't one. She looked up, her eyes moving between Theodore and Michael. I left because I was sick, sicker than anyone knew. Sick? Theodore moved closer, sinking into the chair opposite hers. What are you talking about? You were fine. A sad smile touched Catherine's lips. I wasn't fine, Theo. I hadn't been fine for years. I was just very good at hiding it. As the room fell silent, Catherine began to speak, her voice growing stronger as she revealed the truth she had hidden for so long. She described the depression that had begun shortly after Michael's birth, manageable at first, then increasingly debilitating. How she'd hidden it, ashamed of what she perceived as weakness in the face of a seemingly perfect life. I had everything. A wonderful husband, a beautiful son, this home. What right did I have to be unhappy? She shook her head. So I pretended. I became an expert at pretending. By the time Michael was in middle school, she explained, the depression had deepened, accompanied by frightening episodes where she couldn't remember hours of her day, dissociative periods that terrified her. The night I left, she continued, her voice dropping, I had the worst episode yet. I found myself driving on the highway with no memory of getting in the car. I was terrified of what I might do, to myself or someone else. I checked into a motel planning to call Theo in the morning. But you didn't call, Theodore said, his voice hollow. Catherine closed her eyes briefly. The next morning I saw my face on the local news. Prominent businessman's wife missing. There were police, search parties, and I panicked. Panicked? Michael's voice rose. We were worried sick. Dad hired private investigators. They searched the river for your body. I know, Catherine whispered. I know how terrible it sounds. But in that moment, something in me broke. I saw a way out of the life I couldn't handle anymore, out of being a burden to you both. I convinced myself you would be better off. Better off? Theodore leaned forward, anguish etched into every line of his face. How could we possibly be better off believing you were dead? Catherine met his gaze directly. Because the alternative was knowing your wife, your mother, was mentally ill and couldn't bear the life you thought was perfect. She drew a shaky breath. It was wrong. It was selfish and wrong, but in my distorted thinking, it seemed like the only option. The room fell silent as they absorbed her words. Emma felt Michael's hand tighten around hers, his breathing shallow and quick. What happened after that? Emma asked gently, breaking the silence. Where did you go? Catherine seemed grateful for the question. I went to Arizona, changed my name to Ruth Morgan, my grandmother's name. Got a job as a bookkeeper at a small company. Started over. For 17 years, Theodore's voice cracked. You lived a completely different life for 17 years without once thinking we deserved to know you were alive? I thought about you every day, Catherine said, her composure finally breaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. Every single day, but the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to imagine coming back. What could I possibly say to explain? How could I ask for forgiveness for something so unforgivable? Michael abruptly released Emma's hand and walked to the window, turning his back on the room. The rigid set of his shoulders betrayed his struggle for control. What changed? Theodore asked. Why now, after all this time? Catherine's eyes moved to Emma. 2 months ago, I lost my job. The company downsized. I couldn't find new work. Who wants to hire a 60-year-old woman with a sketchy employment history? I couldn't pay rent. Eventually, I became homeless. She paused. I decided to come back to Massachusetts. Not to find you, but just to be near where my life had been. I told myself I just wanted to see the places I remembered. She described how she'd spent weeks gathering courage, watching the Reynolds estate from a distance, trying to determine if they still lived there. Then last week Emma gave me bread. She was kind when she didn't have to be, and when she mentioned her fiancé, something made me ask his name. You knew who I was? Emma asked, remembering the strange intensity in Ruth's, Catherine's gaze. Not until you said your fiancé's name was Michael Reynolds, Catherine replied. Then I knew. It felt like a sign, like the universe was giving me one last chance to make things right, or at least to try. Theodore stood abruptly, moving to the drinks cabinet and pouring himself a generous measure of scotch. His hand trembled visibly. 17 years, he repeated, echoing Michael's earlier words. Do you have any idea what your disappearance did to our son? Catherine flinched. I can imagine. No, you can't. Theodore cut her off, his voice suddenly hard. You didn't see him checking the phone every day for years, convinced you would call. You didn't see him searching every woman's face when we traveled, hoping to spot you in a crowd. You didn't hold him when he cried himself to sleep on his birthdays because you weren't there. Michael turned from the window, his face wet with tears he hadn't bothered to wipe away. Why didn't you get help? He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle despite his obvious pain. If you were that sick, why didn't you tell Dad? Tell anyone. Catherine's shoulders slumped. Pride, shame, fear, all of it. Mental illness wasn't discussed the way it is now, especially in our social circle. I was supposed to be perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess. I thought admitting I was broken would mean losing everything. Instead, we lost you, Theodore said, the anger in his voice giving way to profound sadness. Catherine nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, the sound oddly normal amidst the surreal conversation. For several minutes, no one spoke. The caterers, sensing the tension, had retreated to the kitchen. Even Olivia seemed at a loss for words, her wedding portfolio forgotten on the side table. Finally, Emma spoke. Catherine, she said gently, where are you staying now? Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I have a room at the Budget Inn on Highway 16. I used nearly all my remaining money for it. Before Emma could respond, Theodore set down his glass with a decisive clink. You'll stay here, he said firmly. Whatever happens next, whatever we decide, you're not going back to that motel. This is still your home. Catherine looked up at him, disbelief and gratitude warring in her expression. Theo, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. I'm doing it because I couldn't live with myself if I sent you away. Not again. Not knowing what I know now. Michael crossed the room to stand beside his father, his face composed now despite the redness around his eyes. Dad's right. You'll stay here while we figure things out. The simple words, devoid of forgiveness, yet not without compassion, seemed to affect Catherine more deeply than anger would have. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when Olivia cleared her throat. Perhaps we should postpone dinner, she suggested, glancing at the untouched champagne and the elaborate table setting visible through the archway to the dining room. I should go, Catherine said, rising shakily from her chair. You were celebrating something important. I've intruded enough. No, Emma said decisively, surprised by her own certainty. We were celebrating family. And whatever else has happened, your family. She turned to Michael, searching his face. Aren't we celebrating the fact that family can overcome anything? Michael's expression softened as he looked at Emma, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. He nodded slowly. Emma's right, Theodore said after a moment. We'll have dinner as planned. Catherine, you'll join us. It wasn't a question but a statement, the words of a man accustomed to taking charge in difficult situations. As they moved toward the dining room, the atmosphere remained tense but no longer frozen with shock. Catherine walked uncertainly, as if relearning the geography of a house that had once been hers. At the threshold to the dining room, she paused, her gaze falling on the formal table with its crystal and silver. I used to polish that silver every Christmas, she said softly, almost to herself. Remember, Theo? You'd put on those old jazz records, and we'd work together in the kitchen. Theodore's expression flickered with unexpected warmth. Ella Fitzgerald, he said. You always insisted it had to be Ella. For the first time that evening, Catherine smiled, a real smile that transformed her face, erasing years of hardship and revealing the woman from the photograph in the hallway. It still does, she said. As they took their seats around the table, Emma caught Michael's eye across the gleaming mahogany surface. His expression was unreadable, a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't begin to unravel, but when she reached for his hand under the table, he didn't pull away. His fingers interlaced with hers, holding on as if she were a lifeline in a stormy sea. The dinner that followed was unlike any Emma had ever experienced, surreal, tense, and punctuated by moments of unexpected connection. Catherine ate sparingly, as if unaccustomed to such abundance, while Theodore watched her with an expression that shifted between wonder, anger, and lingering disbelief. By the time dessert was served, the initial shock had begun to give way to cautious questioning. Olivia asked about Arizona. James inquired about Catherine's job as a bookkeeper. With each answer, Catherine seemed to grow more present, more substantial, as if the act of sharing her life was helping to bridge the 17-year gap. When dinner finally concluded, Theodore suggested they move to the library for coffee. As the others filed out of the dining room, Michael hung back, motioning for Emma to wait with him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly once they were alone. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she knew well. "I don't know what I am," he admitted. Angry, confused, relieved. He looked at her with vulnerable honesty. "When I saw her standing there, it was like seeing a ghost. Part of me still thinks I might be dreaming." Emma touched his face gently. "It's real. She's real. How do you feel about all this?" he asked suddenly. "You're marrying into a family that just got a lot more complicated." Emma thought about the woman who now sat in Theodore's library, sipping coffee in a home she had once fled. About the profound pain and courage it must have taken to return, knowing she might be rejected. About the inexplicable connection that had brought them together at a rain-soaked bus stop. "I feel like we've been given something rare," she said finally. "A chance to heal what was broken. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But your mother came back, Michael." After 17 years, she found her way home. Michael's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "You don't have to know that yet," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "Right now, maybe it's enough just to listen, to try to understand." He nodded slowly, then leaned forward to kiss her, a brief, tender gesture of gratitude. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against her lips. "Maybe not," she teased gently, relieved to see a flicker of his usual humor return. "But you're stuck with me anyway." As they walked toward the library together, Emma felt the weight of the evening's revelations settle around them like a mantle. Their engagement celebration had transformed into something entirely different, the beginning of a journey none of them had anticipated. Yet somehow, as she watched Michael square his shoulders before entering the library, Emma felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with painful conversations and hard-earned truths, but tonight, a family that had been fractured for 17 years was under one roof again, and it had begun with nothing more than a simple piece of bread offered to a stranger in the rain. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains when Emma finally drifted off to sleep in the guest room of the Reynolds estate. The night had stretched into the early morning hours as Catherine answered questions, filled in the gaps of her 17-year absence, and listened to the painful recounting of what her disappearance had done to the family she'd left behind. Emma had witnessed it all. Theodore's barely contained anger giving way to grief, then to a tentative acceptance. Michael's emotional journey from shock to hurt, to a guarded willingness to listen, Catherine's painful honesty about her mental illness, and the distorted thinking that had led to her disappearance. By the time they'd all retired to their rooms, Catherine installed in the guest suite, farthest from the master bedroom, as if by mutual unspoken agreement. Emma had felt drained, yet oddly energized, as if she'd witnessed something profound and transformative. She awoke 3 hours later to the sound of quiet movement in the hallway. Slipping on the robe Theodore had provided, she opened her door to find Catherine standing at the end of the corridor, gazing at the family photographs that lined the wall. "Catherine," Emma called softly, not wanting to startle her. The older woman turned, offering a small smile. "I'm sorry if I woke you. I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I, really," Emma admitted, joining her by the photographs. "This is all a lot to process." Catherine nodded, her attention returning to the images before them, a chronological display of Michael's life from childhood through adulthood. "I missed so much," she said, her voice barely audible. "His high school graduation, college, becoming a man." Her finger hovered near a photo of Michael in his university rowing team uniform. He was such a sensitive child, always worried about everyone else's feelings. "I see he grew into that same kind of man." "He did," Emma confirmed. "It's one of the things I love most about him." Catherine studied Emma with those penetrating dark eyes. "Last night, with everything happening, I never properly thanked you. Not just for the bread that day, but for making my son happy." She gestured to a recent photograph of Michael and Emma at a charity gala, both laughing at something outside the frame. "I can see it in every picture of you together. He lights up around you." Emma felt a rush of emotion. "We make each other happy," she said simply. "Tell me about how you met," Catherine requested, moving away from the photographs toward the window seat at the end of the hall. She sat, patting the space beside her in invitation. As the household slept, Emma found herself sharing the story of her relationship with Michael. Their first meeting at the lighthouse during a summer storm, their friendship that gradually blossomed into romance, his proposal just 1 week earlier. Catherine listened intently, asking questions that revealed her desire to know her son as he was now, not as the 17-year-old she remembered. "What about you?" Emma asked when she'd finished. "Your life in Arizona, were you ever happy there?" Catherine considered the question, gazing out at the estate grounds now bathed in early morning light. "There were moments of peace," she said finally. "I found a good therapist who helped me understand my condition. I made a few friends. I even dated someone briefly about 10 years ago." She smiled sadly. "But happy? No. How could I be, knowing what I'd done to the people I loved most?" "Yet you didn't come back," Emma observed, keeping her tone gentle rather than accusatory. "The longer I stayed away, the more impossible returning seemed," Catherine explained. "I told myself they had moved on, that coming back would only reopen wounds that had begun to heal." She sighed deeply. "It was more rationalizing, of course. More fear, until I lost everything and found myself on that bus bench." "Do you believe in fate?" Emma asked suddenly. Catherine's expression softened. "I never used to, but meeting you that day, what are the odds that of all the people who might have offered kindness to a homeless woman, it would be the woman engaged to my son?" She shook her head in wonder. "Maybe the universe does conspire to heal what's broken if we're brave enough to follow where it leads." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the garden beyond the window became more distinct in the strengthening daylight. "What happens now?" Emma finally asked. "With you and Theodore? With Michael?" Catherine's hands tightened in her lap. "I don't know. I have no right to expect anything. If they ask me to leave once the shock wears off, I'll understand." "I don't think that will happen," Emma said thoughtfully. "Theodore may be angry, but there was something in his eyes last night when he looked at you, something that hasn't died, even after all this time." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I never stopped loving him," she whispered. "Or Michael. Not for a single day." "Then tell them that," Emma urged gently. "Every day for as long as it takes." The sound of a door opening down the hall interrupted their conversation. Theodore emerged from the master bedroom, already dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, despite the early hour. He paused when he saw them, his expression guarded. "Good morning," he said formally, his gaze moving between them. "You're both up early." "Neither of us could sleep," Catherine explained, rising from the window seat. She seemed suddenly unsure, her earlier composure faltering under Theodore's steady gaze. An awkward silence fell, broken when Emma stood as well. "I should check on Michael," she said, sensing they needed privacy. "Thank you for the talk, Catherine." As Emma moved past Theodore, he touched her arm lightly. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for your grace through all of this. Not many women would handle such a situation with your compassion." Emma smiled. "Family is family," she said simply, before continuing down the hall to Michael's childhood bedroom where they'd spent the night. She found him awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at an old photograph he'd taken from his nightstand. A faded Polaroid of himself as a child, sitting on Catherine's lap as she read him a story. "Hey," Emma said softly, closing the door behind her. Michael looked up, his expression troubled. "I woke up thinking it was all a dream," he said. "Then I saw this and it all came crashing back." He set the photograph aside. "Where were you?" "Talking with your mother," Emma admitted, sitting beside him. "She was looking at the family photos in the hallway." Michael tensed slightly at the word mother. "What did she say?" "She wanted to know about us, how we met, our relationship. She's trying to know you as you are now, Michael." He ran a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. "I don't know how to feel about any of this. Part of me wants to embrace her and never let go. Another part wants to scream at her until my voice gives out." He looked at Emma with vulnerable honesty. "Is it possible to love someone and be furious with them at the same time?" Emma took his hand. "I think that's exactly what family is sometimes," she said gently. "Loving people even when they hurt you, forgiving not because they deserve it, but because holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts them." Michael leaned against her, drawing strength from her presence. "I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive yet," he admitted, "but I think I'm ready to try understanding." "That's more than enough for now," Emma assured him. They remained that way for several minutes, the morning light strengthening around them, before Michael spoke again. "What about our wedding? Do we postpone it with all this happening?" The question caught Emma by surprise. In the chaos of Catherine's return, she hadn't given a thought to their upcoming nuptials, planned for 6 months in the future. "I don't think we need to," she said after considering. 6 months is a long time. Whatever happens with your family, our commitment to each other hasn't changed." Michael nodded, visibly relieved. "I was afraid you might want to run for the hills after seeing what you're marrying into." Emma smiled, kissing him softly. "For better or worse, remember? This just happens to be the worse part coming a little early." When they finally ventured downstairs, they found Theodore and Catherine in the kitchen, a domestic scene so ordinary, yet so extraordinary given the circumstances, that Emma paused in the doorway. Catherine stood at the stove, scrambling eggs with practiced movements, while Theodore made coffee at the counter nearby. They weren't speaking, but there was a rhythm to their movements, an unconscious choreography that 17 years apart hadn't erased. "Something smells good," Michael said, breaking the spell as he entered the kitchen. Catherine turned, a flash of uncertainty crossing her features before she smiled tentatively. "I hope you still like your eggs with cheese and chives," she said. "I found some in the refrigerator." "I do," Michael confirmed, moving to the cabinet to retrieve plates. The simple act, setting the table for breakfast with his long-lost mother cooking, seemed to ground him in the reality of the situation. As they ate, the conversation remained careful, focused on neutral topics: the weather, changes to the town over the years, Emma's work at the hospital. Yet beneath the mundane exchange, Emma sensed a thawing, a gradual lowering of defenses as they navigated this strange new reality together. After breakfast, Theodore announced he needed to make some calls to reschedule meetings for the day. "I think," he said, looking directly at Catherine. "We have more important matters to address than quarterly projections." When he had gone, Catherine began clearing the dishes, her movements efficient despite her evident exhaustion. "He still takes his coffee the same way," she observed quietly, almost to herself. "Strong, with just a splash of cream." "Some things don't change," Michael replied, watching her with an expression Emma couldn't quite decipher. Catherine set down the plate she was holding and turned to face him fully. "Michael," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, "I know words aren't enough. I know sorry doesn't begin to cover what I did. But I want you to know that not a day went by when I didn't think of you, didn't miss you, didn't regret my choice." Michael was silent for a long moment. "When I was 18, he finally said, Dad and I went to the police station to have you declared legally dead. Do you know what that feels like? Signing papers that say your mother no longer exists?" Catherine flinched but didn't look away. "No," she whispered. "I can't imagine. I had to pick a college without you, graduate without you, start my career without you." His voice grew stronger with each statement, years of suppressed pain finding release. "Every major milestone in my life happened with this hole where you should have been." "I know," Catherine said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, if you'll let me." Michael's hands clenched at his sides. "I'm engaged now, planning a wedding, starting a family of my own. Where do you fit into that? How does this work?" Catherine wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "However you want it to work," she said simply. "If you want me at your wedding, I'll be there. If you don't, I'll understand. If you want me to be part of your life in some small way, I'll be grateful for whatever you can give. And if you need more time, or if you decide you can't forgive me at all," her voice broke, "I'll respect that too." The raw honesty of her words seemed to affect Michael deeply. He blinked rapidly, struggling for composure. "I need time," he said finally. "I can't promise anything right now." Catherine nodded, accepting this. "Time is a gift I don't deserve," she said, "but I'm thankful for it." Emma, who had remained silent during their exchange, felt a surge of pride in Michael's strength and Catherine's courage. Neither was taking the easy path. Michael could have rejected her outright. Catherine could have made excuses for her actions. Instead, they were facing the painful truth together, the first tentative step toward possible reconciliation. The days that followed established a cautious routine. Catherine remained at the estate, occupying the guest room that became unofficially hers. Theodore arranged for her to see a psychiatrist who specialized in depression and dissociative disorders, ensuring she had proper medication and support. Michael returned to work at his architectural firm, but came to dinner at the estate each evening, sometimes with Emma, sometimes alone. During those first weeks, Emma often found herself in the unexpected role of bridge between Catherine and the family she had abandoned. They seemed to find it easier to speak through her sometimes, as if her neutral position allowed for conversations too painful to have directly. "He used to build elaborate structures with his blocks," Catherine told Emma one afternoon as they walked the estate grounds. "Even at 3, you could see he had an eye for design. Is he happy with his work now?" Emma described Michael's passion for sustainable architecture, his dedication to creating beautiful spaces that existed in harmony with the environment. Catherine listened with visible pride, absorbing every detail about the man her son had become. Similarly, Michael would ask Emma questions he couldn't yet bring himself to ask Catherine directly. Was she really living on the streets? For how long? Did she seem okay when you met her? Emma answered honestly but gently, helping him understand the journey that had brought his mother back to them without minimizing the pain her choices had caused. Theodore, meanwhile, maintained a careful distance, polite but reserved, as if uncertain how to relate to the woman who had once been the center of his world. Emma often caught him watching Catherine when he thought no one would notice, his expression a complex mixture of lingering anger, confusion, and something that looked remarkably like longing. 1 month after Catherine's return, as summer gave way to early autumn, Emma arrived at the estate to find Theodore alone on the terrace, nursing a glass of scotch as he watched the sunset paint the gardens in gold and amber. "Michael's running late," he explained when she joined him. "Client meeting downtown." Emma nodded, settling into the chair beside him. "Where's Catherine?" "Therapy session." James drove her. He took a sip of his scotch, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Did you know I never dated after she disappeared? Not once in 17 years. The admission surprised Emma. Theodore was still handsome, wealthy, and relatively young. She had assumed there had been relationships, even if they hadn't resulted in remarriage. "I couldn't," he continued, answering her unspoken question. "I told myself it was because I needed to focus on Michael, on the business, but the truth was simpler." He turned to look at Emma directly. "I never stopped loving her." "Have you told her that?" Emma asked gently. Theodore shook his head. "How can I? After what she did, after the years we lost." He set his glass down with deliberate care. "And yet, having her here again, seeing her across the breakfast table each morning, it's like some essential piece of myself has been returned." "Maybe that's what you should tell her," Emma suggested. Before Theodore could respond, the terrace doors opened and Michael appeared, still in his work clothes. His tie loosened after a long day. "Sorry I'm late," he said, bending to kiss Emma hello before nodding to his father. "Where's Mom?" The word hung in the air between them, the first time Michael had referred to Catherine as Mom since her return. Theodore's eyes widened slightly, but he made no comment on the shift. "Therapy session," he repeated. "She should be back soon." Michael nodded, taking the seat on Emma's other side. "Good. I wanted to talk to both of you about something." He reached for Emma's hand, interlacing their fingers. "Emma and I have been discussing the wedding." Theodore straightened, his expression concerned. "You're not postponing, I hope?" "No," Michael assured him. "Just the opposite, actually. We've decided to move it forward." Emma squeezed his hand encouragingly as he continued. "The last month has taught me something important," Michael explained. "Life is unpredictable. Time isn't guaranteed. When you find something good, something right, you shouldn't wait." He looked at Emma with such tenderness that she felt tears prick her eyes. "We're thinking December, small ceremony, close family and friends." Theodore nodded slowly, processing this. "December is lovely for a wedding," he said. "The house looks its best, decorated for the holidays." "We were hoping you'd offer," Michael said, a hint of his old smile appearing. "And Dad." He hesitated, then forged ahead. "I want to ask Mom to be there. Not just as a guest, but as my mother." The simple statement, delivered without drama or fanfare, nevertheless carried enormous weight. Theodore's expression softened as he regarded his son. "I think," he said carefully, "that would be entirely appropriate." The sound of a car on the gravel driveway announced Catherine's return. As they watched, she emerged from James's car, waving goodbye to him before turning toward the house. She paused when she spotted them on the terrace, uncertainty crossing her features before she changed direction and approached. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, hesitating at the bottom of the terrace steps. "Not at all," Theodore replied, rising from his chair. Michael was just sharing some news about the wedding. Catherine's gaze moved to Michael, a question in her eyes. "We're moving it up to December," he told her, "here at the house, and we'd like you to be part of it, if you want to be." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Michael, are you sure?" Michael nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I'm sure. I can't promise that everything will be fixed by then, but you're my mother. You should be at my wedding." Catherine ascended the steps slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the moment. When she reached the top, she stood before Michael, her hands clasped tightly to keep them from trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "I would be honored." Emma watched as Michael rose from his chair and after a moment's hesitation opened his arms. Catherine stepped into his embrace with a soft sob. her frame appearing even smaller against his as he held her carefully as if she might break. Over Catherine's shoulder, Michael's eyes met Emma's, a silent acknowledgement of the significance of this moment. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a willingness to begin the journey toward it. Theodore watched them, his expression unreadable, before quietly excusing himself and going inside. Emma made to follow, concerned, but Michael shook his head slightly. Some journeys had to be taken alone, his eyes seemed to say. Theodore would find his own path to reconciliation in his own time. As the golden light of sunset faded to the soft blue of twilight, Emma reflected on how much had changed in the month since that rainy evening at the bus stop. A simple act of kindness, a piece of bread offered to a stranger, had set in motion events that had brought a family back together after 17 years of separation and pain. There were still difficult conversations ahead, still wounds to heal and trust to rebuild. But watching Michael and Catherine slowly separate from their embrace, both wiping tears from their cheeks, Emma felt a surge of hope. Sometimes the most broken things could be mended, becoming stronger at the shattered places than they had ever been before. And sometimes the most ordinary moments, a rainy evening, a chance encounter, a loaf of bread, could change everything. October painted the estate in brilliant hues of crimson and gold, a visual symphony that matched the gradual transformation occurring within its walls. As weeks turned into months, the initial shock of Catherine's return gave way to a new normal. Still fragile, still evolving but increasingly stable, Emma found herself spending more time at the Reynolds estate, drawn not only by Michael, but by a growing attachment to the unfolding story of this healing family. She watched as Catherine cautiously reclaimed small pieces of her former life, tending the garden beds she had once designed, preparing special meals remembered from Michael's childhood, gradually filling the guest room with small personal touches that made it her own. Most evenings after dinner, Catherine would retreat to her room early, giving Theodore and Michael space they still seemed to need. But sometimes Emma would find her in the library, curled in a window seat with a book, her silver-streaked hair catching the lamplight. On those occasions, they would talk about Emma's work, about Catherine's therapy progress, about the upcoming wedding plans, and eventually about deeper things. "I've started journaling," Catherine told her one evening in mid-October, closing the leather-bound book in her lap. "My therapist suggested it might help me process everything." Emma settled into a nearby chair, a cup of tea warming her hands against the autumn chill. "Is it helping?" Catherine nodded. "It forces me to be honest with myself, about why I left, why I stayed away, what I hope for now." She traced the cover of the journal with her fingertips. "I've been writing letters too, to Theodore and Michael, things I need to say but can't find the courage to speak aloud yet." "Will you give them the letters?" Emma asked. "Someday, perhaps." Catherine smiled sadly. "When I'm braver than I am now." Their conversation was interrupted by Theodore's appearance in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping back. "I didn't realize anyone was in here." "Please join us," Emma invited, sensing Catherine's sudden tension. "I was just about to head upstairs anyway." Theodore hesitated, then entered the library as Emma rose to leave. She squeezed Catherine's hand encouragingly before saying her goodnights and slipping out, pausing briefly in the hallway to see Theodore take the seat she had vacated. Their voices, too low to distinguish words, created a gentle murmur that followed Emma as she climbed the stairs to find Michael. He was in his old bedroom, now converted to a home office, sorting through architectural plans spread across a desk that had once held schoolbooks. "How's it going?" Emma asked, leaning against the doorframe. Michael looked up, his tired expression softening at the sight of her. "Almost done. Just finalizing the community center designs for tomorrow's presentation." He stretched, rolling his shoulders to release tension. "Where were you?" "Talking with your mother in the library. Your father just joined her." Michael's eyebrows rose slightly. "Voluntarily. That's new." It was true. While Theodore had been unfailingly polite to Catherine, he had generally avoided being alone with her, maintaining a careful distance that everyone pretended not to notice. "Maybe they're finally ready to really talk," Emma suggested, moving to massage Michael's tight shoulders. "It's been almost 3 months." Michael leaned into her touch with a grateful sigh. 3 months doesn't seem like much against 17 years of absence. "No," Emma agreed, "but it's a start." Downstairs in the library, Theodore and Catherine sat in silence for several minutes after Emma's departure. The crackling fire and ticking clock provided the only sounds as Catherine waited, hands folded in her lap, for Theodore to speak. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about Christmas," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "With the wedding on the 23rd and everything else, I thought perhaps we should discuss how to handle the holidays." Catherine nodded, grateful for the practical topic. "Of course, I'm happy to help with whatever needs to be done. If you still put up the big tree in the foyer—" "I didn't," Theodore interrupted, his gaze fixed on the fire. "After you left, I couldn't bear it. All those ornaments we'd collected together, the traditions, it felt wrong without you. So I stopped. Just a small tree in the living room for Michael's sake, nothing more." The admission hung between them, more revealing than any emotional declaration might have been. Catherine absorbed it silently, understanding what it must have cost this proud man to share even this small glimpse of his grief. "I'm sorry, Theo," she said softly, "for all of it, for every Christmas, every birthday, every ordinary Tuesday that I missed, for all the pain I caused you and Michael." Theodore finally looked at her directly. "I've been angry for so long," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "First at whoever might have taken you, then at the police for not finding you, then at myself for not protecting you somehow. When I learned the truth, that you chose to leave, I thought the anger would consume me entirely." Catherine didn't flinch from his words or his gaze. "You have every right to your anger," she said. "I won't ask you to let it go until you're ready, if ever." "That's just it," Theodore said, leaning forward slightly. "I am ready. Not because what you did wasn't devastating. It was. Not because I've forgotten the years we lost. I haven't. But because holding on to that anger hurts me more than it hurts you." He paused, struggling for words. "Seeing you every day these past months, watching you try so hard to make amends, to be honest about your illness, to respect our boundaries while still being present. It's changed something in me." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Theo, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not saying I'm ready to pick up where we left off. I don't think either of us is the same person we were 17 years ago. But I am saying that I'm ready to start getting to know who you are now. The woman who found the courage to come back, to face what she'd done, to begin again." He drew a deep breath. "And maybe with time we can build something new from the pieces of what we had." Catherine's tears spilled over, tracking silently down her cheeks. "I would like that," she whispered. "Very much." Theodore nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright in the firelight. "Then perhaps we should start with Christmas," he suggested, his voice steadier now. "A proper Reynolds Christmas with all the trimmings, for Michael and Emma's first holiday as a married couple." "I'd like that too," Catherine said, wiping her tears away. "The big tree in the foyer?" "The big tree," Theodore confirmed, the ghost of a smile touching his lips, "with all those ridiculous ornaments we collected on our trips." "Even the ceramic lobster from Maine?" Catherine asked, a tentative smile emerging through her tears. "Especially the lobster," Theodore replied, and for the first time since her return, he reached across the space between them and took her hand. Upstairs, Emma helped Michael gather his plans into a portfolio for the next day's meeting. "Do you think your parents will be okay?" she asked, handing him a ruler. Michael considered the question seriously. "I don't know," he admitted. "What they had was special, the kind of marriage everyone envies. But 17 years is a long time to be apart. They're different people now. Different doesn't mean they can't find their way back to each other," Emma pointed out. "Just in a new way, perhaps." Michael set down his work and pulled Emma into his arms. When did you get so wise? He murmured against her hair. I've always been wise, she teased. You're just finally noticing. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, in a way it hadn't been when Catherine first returned. The constant tension that had marked his features had eased over the months, not erased completely but softened, as if he was gradually setting down a heavy burden he'd carried for too long. 1 month until we're married, he said, changing the subject. Having any second thoughts? Emma pretended to consider. Well, your family drama is pretty spectacular, she mused. But I suppose every family has its quirks. Quirks? Michael repeated incredulously. Is that what we're calling my mother's 17-year disappearance and surprise return? A quirk? Would you prefer unique family situation? Emma suggested, her eyes twinkling. Michael shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're impossible. Yet you're marrying me anyway, she pointed out. Best decision I ever made, he said, suddenly serious. I couldn't have gotten through these past months without you, Emma. You've been the calm in the center of this storm. Emma cupped his face in her hands. That's what partners do, she said simply. We stand together through whatever comes. As November arrived with its shorter days and gathering chill, wedding preparations intensified. Olivia, true to her nature, threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm that occasionally bordered on overwhelming. Catherine offered assistance when asked, but never imposed, understanding that her role in this celebration remained tenuous, defined by Michael's increasing comfort with her presence. The invitations, elegant cream cardstock with emerald green accents, made no mention of the mother of the groom, an omission that Catherine accepted without comment. What mattered, she told Emma when the younger woman apologetically explained, was being present for the day itself. Besides, she added with a small smile, my official return from the dead is still making its way through the legal system. I'm not sure what name I'd be listed under anyway. The legal complexities of Catherine's reappearance had indeed proved challenging. Theodore had engaged attorneys to navigate the process of reversing her declaration of death, reinstating her identity, and addressing the practical matters of property, accounts, and legal status. The proceedings moved slowly, hampered by the unusual circumstances and Catherine's own reluctance to provide certain details about her years away. There are parts of my story that belong only to me, she had explained when Theodore pressed for information the lawyers needed, things that wouldn't help anyone to know. Though frustrated by her reticence, Theodore had ultimately respected her boundaries, instructing the legal team to work with what information she was willing to share. Emma suspected this accommodation was as much a sign of his evolving feelings as any practical consideration. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emma arrived at the estate to find a flurry of activity. Workers erecting a heated tent on the back lawn, florists consulting with Olivia about winter arrangements, caterers discussing menu options with Theodore. In the midst of the controlled chaos, she spotted Catherine sitting alone on a garden bench, watching the proceedings with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. "It's getting real, isn't it?" Emma said, joining her on the bench. Catherine nodded, her breath visible in the crisp air. "It's going to be beautiful," she said. "Exactly the kind of wedding Michael deserves." Something in her tone made Emma look at her more closely. "What's wrong?" Catherine sighed, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just, I keep thinking about all the milestones I missed, his graduation, his first job, and now I get to be at his wedding, when I've done nothing to earn the privilege." "You've earned it these past months," Emma said gently, "by showing up every day, by respecting his boundaries, by being honest about your illness and your mistakes." Catherine smiled sadly. "That's kind of you to say, but we both know the real reason I'm included is because of you, because you have a generous heart, and because you love my son enough to accommodate his broken family." "That's not true," Emma insisted. "Michael wants you here. He's told me so himself. This isn't about me or what I want. It's about his choice to include his mother in one of the most important days of his life." Before Catherine could respond, Michael's voice called out from the terrace, "There you are. Dad's asking for your opinion on the cake flavors." As they rose to join him, Catherine placed a hand on Emma's arm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you've done for this family, for my family." Emma covered Catherine's hand with her own. "They're my family too now," she reminded her, "or they will be in 2 weeks." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations, family arrivals, and pre-wedding celebrations. Emma's parents, initially wary of the Reynolds family situation when she had explained it to them, warmed to Catherine after spending time with her, recognizing her genuine remorse and her efforts to make amends. "She's been through something profound," Emma's mother observed after a rehearsal dinner where Catherine had quietly helped ensure everything ran smoothly while remaining in the background. "You can see it in her eyes. Whatever drove her away, whatever kept her away, it wasn't done lightly." The night before the wedding, as tradition dictated, Emma stayed at her parents' hotel rather than at the Reynolds estate. Michael called just before midnight, his voice betraying a mix of excitement and nerves. "Everything's ready here," he told her. "The tent looks amazing with all the lights. The flowers arrived. Dad and Mom are actually working together on last-minute details without any awkwardness." Emma smiled at his unconscious use of Mom rather than Catherine, a shift that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "That's wonderful," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Impatient," he admitted. "I just want it to be tomorrow already. I want to see you walking down that aisle toward me." "Less than 24 hours, she reminded him. "Try to get some sleep." After they hung up, Emma stood at her hotel window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow she would become Emma Reynolds, joining her life to Michael's and, by extension, to his complicated family. The thought filled her not with trepidation, but with a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place exactly as they should. She thought of Catherine, who had lost everything and found her way back to what mattered most, of Theodore learning to open his heart again after years of carefully guarded grief, of Michael finding the courage to forge a new relationship with the mother who had abandoned him, and of herself, the accidental catalyst who had set this healing in motion with nothing more than a simple act of kindness. As she finally drifted towards sleep, Emma realized that in many ways, tomorrow's celebration was about more than just her marriage to Michael. It was about the remarkable capacity of the human heart to heal, to forgive, to begin again. And there was no better foundation on which to build a life together. December 23rd dawned clear and cold, a perfect winter's day with brilliant sunshine that made the frost-covered landscape sparkle like diamonds. Emma stood at her hotel room window, watching her breath create small clouds on the glass, as her mother and bridesmaids bustled around behind her, arranging hair tools and makeup, hanging her gown from the bathroom door to release any remaining wrinkles. "Nervous?" her mother asked, appearing at her side with a cup of tea. Emma accepted it gratefully. "Surprisingly, no," she answered honestly. "Just ready." The morning passed in a whirl of activity: hairstyling, makeup application, champagne toasts with her bridesmaids, her mother's tearful assistance with the vintage lace gown Emma had fallen in love with months earlier. By noon, she was transformed into a bride, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon adorned with tiny pearl pins, her gown's fitted bodice giving way to a flowing skirt that moved like water when she walked. "Oh, Emma," her father said when he entered to escort her to the waiting car. His eyes glistened as he took in the sight of his only daughter in her bridal finery. "You look like something from a dream." At the Reynolds estate, everything was in readiness. The ceremony would take place in the grand living room, transformed by the florist's art into a winter wonderland of white roses, silver branches, and countless twinkling lights. Afterward, guests would move to the heated tent for the reception, where tables draped in emerald green and silver awaited, each centerpiece a masterpiece of winter greenery and white blooms. In his childhood bedroom, now serving as a groom's suite, Michael adjusted his bow tie for the third time, his hands not quite steady. "Here, let me," Theodore said, stepping forward to straighten the stubborn accessory. "I had the same problem on my wedding day. Couldn't get the damn thing to cooperate." Michael stood still, allowing his father to make the adjustment. "Were you nervous?" he asked. "When you married Mom?" Theodore's hands paused briefly before resuming their task. "Terrified," he admitted with a small smile. "Not of marrying her, that was the easiest decision I ever made, but of somehow not being enough for her. Your mother is an extraordinary woman. I always felt lucky that she chose me." "Even after everything?" Michael asked quietly. Theodore finished with the bow tie and stepped back, regarding his son with serious eyes. "Even after everything," he confirmed. "What happened between us, her leaving, the years apart, that doesn't erase the good we had. The love was real, Michael. Always remember that." A knock at the door interrupted them. James poked his head in. "5 minutes," he announced. "The guests are seated and the string quartet is ready to begin." Michael took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I'm ready." And ding, as he moved toward the door, Theodore placed a hand on his arm. "Michael," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so proud of the man you've become. And Emma, she's everything I could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law." Michael embraced his father briefly but fiercely. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered before pulling away, blinking rapidly. "Now stop before you make me ruin these fancy clothes with tears." Downstairs, the house hummed with quiet anticipation. Guests filled the rows of white chairs arranged in the living room, admiring the transformation of the familiar space into a wedding venue. The string quartet played softly in the corner, the gentle notes of Bach filling the air. Catherine slipped into the back row just as the music shifted, signaling the ceremony's imminent beginning. She wore a simple dress of deep burgundy, elegant but understated, her own choice, designed to be present without drawing attention. As she took her seat, Theodore appeared in the doorway, scanning the crowd until his gaze found hers. After a moment's hesitation, he made his way to her side. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Catherine nodded, surprise and pleasure flickering across her features. "Of course." Theodore settled beside her, his shoulder brushing hers lightly. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his eyes taking in the careful styling of her hair, the subtle makeup that enhanced rather than concealed the character in her face. "Thank you," she whispered, then fell silent as the music changed and Michael appeared at the front of the room, taking his place beside the officiant, his best friend from college at his side as best man. The quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon, and the guests rose as the procession began, first Emma's 3 bridesmaids in elegant emerald dresses, then her young niece scattering rose petals along the white runner. A collective murmur of appreciation filled the room as Emma appeared in the doorway on her father's arm, radiant in her vintage lace gown. Catherine felt Theodore's hand find hers as their son watched his bride approach, his face transformed by a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. She squeezed Theodore's fingers gently, overwhelmed by the privilege of being present for this moment she had never expected to see. The ceremony itself was brief but deeply personal. Emma and Michael had written their own vows, simple declarations of commitment that brought tears to many eyes. When they exchanged rings, his a classic platinum band, hers a delicate one designed to complement her emerald engagement ring, Catherine found herself remembering her own wedding day, the boundless hope and certainty she had felt standing beside Theodore. "By the power vested in me," the officiant concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss your bride." The room erupted in applause as Michael gathered Emma close, sealing their union with a kiss that spoke of promise and devotion. When they turned to face their guests, their entwined hands raised in triumph, Catherine felt something release inside her, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "They'll be happy," Theodore said softly, for her ears alone. Despite everything, despite us, they'll be happy. Catherine nodded, unable to speak through the emotion constricting her throat. In that moment, watching her son begin his married life with a woman who had shown such extraordinary grace and compassion, she felt a glimmer of hope for her own future, a future that might include redemption, forgiveness, and perhaps even joy. The reception that followed was everything the young couple had envisioned, elegant yet warm, formal yet filled with laughter and genuine celebration. The heated tent glowed with thousands of fairy lights, creating a magical atmosphere as snow began to fall gently outside, visible through the clear panels along one side. After dinner had been served and enjoyed, after the traditional first dances and cake cutting, Emma found a quiet moment to slip away from the festivities. She stood at the tent's edge, watching the snowflakes dance in the light spilling from the house, when she sensed someone approaching. "Hiding from your own wedding?" Catherine asked, her tone gently teasing as she joined Emma. Emma smiled, just taking a moment to breathe, to remember it all. They stood in companionable silence for a minute, watching the snow transform the landscape into something ethereal and pristine. "I wanted to give you something," Catherine said finally, reaching into a small evening bag. "A wedding gift, just from me." She withdrew a velvet box, aged but well preserved, and placed it in Emma's hands. "This belonged to my grandmother, then to me. I managed to keep it all these years, through everything. It was the one thing I couldn't bear to part with, even when I had nothing else." Emma opened the box carefully to reveal a delicate gold bracelet adorned with small emeralds that caught the light, remarkably similar in color to her engagement ring. "Catherine," she breathed, "it's exquisite. But are you sure? This should go to Michael." "It's for the women in the family," Catherine interrupted gently. "From mother to daughter, or in this case to daughter-in-law. I want you to have it, Emma. Without you, I wouldn't be here today. Without your kindness to a stranger, I might never have found my way home." Emma blinked back tears as Catherine took the bracelet from the box and fastened it around her wrist. "It looks like it was made for you," Catherine observed, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Emma embraced her impulsively. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for coming back, for being brave enough to face everything and everyone. Michael needed you, even if he didn't know it." Catherine returned the embrace, her frame still thin but stronger than it had been months ago when they'd first met. "I think," she said as they separated, "we all needed each other in ways none of us understood." They were interrupted by Michael's appearance at the tent entrance. "There you are," he said, approaching with a smile. "I thought I'd lost my bride already." "Just girl talk," Emma replied, extending her hand to show him the bracelet. "Your mother gave me something extraordinary." Michael's eyes widened as he recognized the piece. "Grandma Eleanor's bracelet," he said softly. "I remember you wearing this when I was little," he added to Catherine. "You said it was magic and would protect the wearer." Catherine smiled at the memory. "You remember that?" "I remember more than you might think," Michael said, his expression softening. "The good along with the difficult, the simple acknowledgement that there had been good times, cherished memories that had survived the pain of abandonment, seemed to touch Catherine deeply." She reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on his arm. "I am so proud of the man you've become," she said, echoing Theodore's earlier words without knowing it, "and so grateful to be here today." Michael covered her hand with his own. "I'm glad you're here too," he said simply. The words weren't quite forgiveness, not yet, but they were acceptance, a bridge spanning the chasm of 17 lost years. The moment was interrupted by the wedding planner's appearance, apologetically informing them it was time for the bouquet toss. As they rejoined the celebration, Emma felt the weight of Catherine's bracelet on her wrist, a tangible connection to the Reynolds family's past, present and future. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and joyful farewells as guests gradually departed, leaving only the immediate family lingering in the warm glow of the tent. As the clock approached midnight, Emma found herself watching Theodore and Catherine seated at a corner table deep in conversation, their heads inclined toward each other with an intimacy that spoke of their shared history. "Do you think they'll find their way back to each other?" she asked Michael as they swayed together on the nearly empty dance floor. Michael followed her gaze. "I don't know," he admitted. "There's still so much to work through. But seeing them together like this, I can remember how they used to be, how good they were together before everything fell apart. Sometimes things that break can be mended," Emma observed. "Not to be exactly as they were before, but into something new, something that honors the breaks rather than hiding them." Michael smiled, pulling her closer. "When did you get so wise, Mrs. Reynolds?" "I've always been wise, Mr. Reynolds," she replied, echoing their earlier conversation. "You're just finally noticing." As the night drew to a close, Michael and Emma prepared to depart for their wedding night at a luxury hotel in the city, ahead of their honeymoon flight to Bali the following afternoon. The remaining family gathered on the front steps to see them off, braving the gentle snowfall that had transformed the estate into a winter wonderland. Amidst the hugs and well-wishes, Catherine approached Emma one last time. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the bread that day, for the kindness that brought me home." Emma embraced her warmly. "Thank you for finding the courage to come back." As they pulled away from the estate, rice and rose petals clinging to their clothing, Emma gazed back at the assembled family waving from the steps. Theodore and Catherine standing side by side, not touching but somehow connected nonetheless. Olivia wiping tears unashamedly. James with his arm around Victoria, their baby asleep against her shoulder. "Look at them," she said to Michael. "Your family." "Our family," he corrected, reaching for her hand. "Complicated, imperfect, and completely ours." Emma smiled, the emeralds in her grandmother's bracelet catching the moonlight as it filtered through the falling snow. From broken pieces, they had built something new, a family reforged through courage, honesty, and the transformative power of forgiveness. And it had all begun with a simple piece of bread offered to a stranger on a rainy evening. As the car turned onto the main road, leaving the illuminated estate behind, Emma felt a sense of completion, of rightness. The journey that had begun that rainy night at the bus stop had led her here, to marriage, to family, to a future bright with possibility. And though she knew there would be challenges ahead, she faced them without fear, secure in the knowledge that love, in all its complex and messy glory, was more than enough to light the way forward. "Are you happy?" Michael asked, glancing at her as they drove through the snow-dusted streets. Emma considered the question, thinking of all that had transpired in the months since that fateful encounter. The pain and joy, the tears and laughter, the broken pieces carefully gathered and reassembled into something beautiful and new. "Yes," she said simply, "I am completely, utterly happy." And she was. For in the end, what greater happiness could there be than this? To love and be loved, to heal and be healed, to find meaning in both the grand moments and the small gestures that changed lives forever. Before I go, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. If you enjoyed this story about how a simple act of kindness can transform lives, please subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt narratives that remind us of our shared humanity. Don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember that sometimes the smallest gestures can create the biggest ripples of change.